So I'm Naadiya Moosajee. I'm the co-founder at WomHub. We a boutique incubator to support female innovation all along the engineering and tech value chain. And so today the conversation is really around cybersecurity for startups. What is it that you need to think about when you're keeping yourself safe online? 90% of small businesses don't use any data protection whatsoever, right? It means that usually startups are super vulnerable to attacks by hackers anywhere around the world. And because we live in a global society that is super interconnected, and because we are now spending so much more of our time in a virtual space, it means that as entrepreneurs, we are really vulnerable. And what does that mean from a vulnerability perspective? It means that, once you have an attack, it takes a really long time for your business to get back to where it used to be. Some businesses never recover from a cyber attack, right? And that's the really sad part of the story right here, right? Let's take a step back and think about what is cybersecurity.
Would you be comfortable living in a house that someone else had the key to? What if an underground tunnel led into it from a public park, where its windows could never quite close all the way? Would you trust it with your safety and your privacy? The internet is that house. This is not to say never go into the house, but rather you should know the hazards before you store all of your valuables there, and do what you can to protect them. So why is it insecure, and why can't we just fortify it until it's safe? Well, first of all, the internet was not originally built to be what it is today. It's like someone decided to expand a shoebox into a skyscraper. The internet originally developed when computers were huge and so expensive to own that only universities, big businesses, and a few governments had them. The point, originally, was to let these massive supercomputers talk to each other. And as soon as two computers could send information back and forth, we had a network. The network gradually grew until personal computers emerged in the 1980s, and then it exploded. Soon, people were not just talking to each other, but also exchanging money, playing games, reading news, shopping, and doing everything we associate with the internet today. Other devices started talking to the network too. Phones and cars and refrigerators and elevators and power plants and much, much more. But the ease of all those devices talking to each other came at a price: security. One computer could send another instructions to delete everything on it or take it over. We call these viruses and malware. Or one person could steal another's identity by guessing, cracking, or extracting a password. Vulnerabilities such as these will never completely go away because they're built into the internet's very architecture. Criminals use them to steal billions of dollars, governments use them for surveillance, and hacktivists use them to further their political goals. Between 2004 and 2013, over 1 billion records of personal information were stolen or leaked through data breaches of major organizations. As a thought experiment, let's imagine what a perfectly secure internet might look like. Users would not be allowed to download or install anything onto their computers. All internet traffic would be monitored and regulated by bots and humans, massively limiting the number of websites you could visit. In order to log on to a website, you'd have to type in a 100-character password, submit a genetic sample, and whistle a tune. The servers that hold data would be kept in heavily armed fortresses on the moon. And even with all these safeguards in place, some clever hacker would almost certainly still find a way in. The good news is, even with our flawed internet, there are simple things you can do to protect yourself.
There's a lot of different kind of cyber threats. These are the top 15 cyber threats that the European police force and then the Agency for Cybersecurity has put together, right? So malware is any software that harms your computer, and usually it gets downloaded quite accidentally, or it's deliberately embedded on a page that you think is going to be safe. So the software is either downloaded or it's downloaded through a web portal, and so that's a web portal attacks. Sometimes it's phishing; it's stealing data from you. as you open up files or information, sometimes they clone a site, and so you think you're going into your banking site, you put all your banking details in and you log into online banking. Meanwhile, it's actually a different site, and they've stolen all your login details, and they can then go into the back end of your internet banking and transfer money. A lot of the time, the identity theft is really common. People are stealing identities, whether they're on social media, so they're cloning your accounts and asking your friends to give you their money. Data breaches, I showed you that picture around the world where data gets breached, very easily. And then we've got insider threats as well, right? So there's sometimes, where there's a disgruntled employee that puts all your information online, puts all your IP out there, sells all the list. If you are a customer facing business and you have all your customer details, they sell your customer list. So there's now these bots as well. So, people are training, AI systems to be able to kind of hack systems as well. And so, there's so many different threats in a cyber, a cyber sphere that we need to think about. And then the other one is cryptojacking, right? And so with cryptocurrency, it's actually quite easy to steal it. At the beginning of this year, $24 million in Bitcoin got stolen, right? And so, while cryptocurrency is a way, everybody's kind of lauding this as kind of the new way in which we have payment systems, it's a super easy way in which you're able to lose money as well, because it's in the virtual space, right? And so as small businesses, while not all of these things help you in your particular business, because you're saying, hey, look, Naz, cryptojacking is not really for me, but there's some very, very applications into real world. The first step is really knowing, right? So if you understand where your vulnerability is as a small business, you're able to kind of do something about it, right, to keep you safe online. So the first is how, right? And so this one is the super easy way, and that is through password protection. Most of the time we have ridiculous passwords. I have seen people who've had their password being password, or 12345, or 67891, or their birthday, or their first name, or their last name, or their children's name, right? And so it's really easy to guess people's names. And so the best way in which you're able to keep yourself safe online is to be able to use things that are alphanumeric as well as symbols, right? So even if you wanted to use the word password, you could use it at P with an @ with a $sign, with the S, and then W with a 0 and ORD, right? And so, being able to use combinations of letters makes it a lot harder for people to really hack your passwords. Now, a lot of organizations are starting to introduce two-step authentication systems. This is super important, because what does this mean? This means every time you're logging in on a new device, it will ask you for your password, and then it will send you either an email or a text or a call to be able to authenticate that is really you, right? And so it's really important for you to be able to kind of use those systems for authentication. How many of you are on Twitter, right? And so I'm on Twitter, love Twitter. Most big organizations are on Twitter. And in December last year, Twitter got hacked. And how did it get hacked? It literally got hacked because somebody phoned, and it was a kid. It wasn't even a super clever hack, right? It was a kid who phoned Twitter, pretending to be one of the network engineers, and he said that he forgot his password, and they reset the password with him on the phone. And so he reset the password, and then he had access to Twitter's mainframe, right? So their main back-end system. And he hacked Bill Gates' account, he hacked Elon Musk, he hacked everybody's account, right? And he could basically say and do whatever he wanted to do. And it was a couple of hours before they even realized that there was a bridge within their system, right? Just because of the password issue. So it's super simple to actually just get somebody's password and wreak havoc, right? So if they can do it to Twitter, what can they do in your small business, right? And so, how is it that you can think about making sure that you password protected within your own organization, not just from a computer technical level, not just two-step authentication, but also making sure that somebody's phoning you to check your details or to check your password or to reset your password. You don't do that over the phone, right? If it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't sit right, just don't do it. The second thing is, so that's a how. The next is the where, right? So where are you logging in from? Most of the time we're now logging in from home. Because under COVID, everybody is based at home. But some of us don't have the luxury, right? We don't have maybe a stable internet connection at home. We've got load shedding at home, and we've got, to get something done. It's end of the month. We need to run payroll. We need to pay all our staff. And so the quickest thing is, let's get into an internet cafe, right? Or let's get onto somebody else's network, right? And that makes you super vulnerable, right? Because that means that, anybody can hack that network. And once they're in the network, right, they're able to kind of see what you're doing. They're able to kind of get in the middle of the information that is being sent, right? So be super careful around your passwords and that. And then, of course, there's the high level piece around, your network as well, and making sure that your network is password protected. So going back to that password conversation, right? So on your routers, is it that you've set two-step authentication on your router? Have you put a password on your router? Do you have an open internet connection? And is your password easily guessed? And so for small businesses, especially if you're in the hospitality industry or the trade industry, make sure that you've got a little bit more security on your network, so that people don't just get in, but also people just don't stuff up your bandwidth, right? The other piece, and that we do connect to security a lot, is we all connect our camera systems to our smartphones, right? And this has now become super popular because we want to be able to check on our company from anywhere, right? So whether it's, we want to check on our office, if our office is safe, especially under COVID, we can't be there. We want to be able to check to make sure that things are going fine. My other life, besides cybersecurity and passionately supporting entrepreneurs, I own 2 restaurants in Cape Town. And so, we able to view what's happening in the restaurants in real time online, right? But that's connected to the Wi-Fi system. Now, the minute you give customers access to that same Wi-Fi system, they're able to hack your camera system, right? And they're able to actually bypass your camera. So if somebody's trying to break into my restaurant, they can bypass my camera system, right? And so you think these things only happen in the movies, in those like Hollywood blockbusters where the guys kind of come in from the ceiling and, they pass all the security beams and they pass all the cameras. But actually, no, it happens in real life, and it happens every day, and it happens to the most vulnerable of us, and it happens to the ones that can least afford for such cyber crimes to happen to, right? So let's think about, how is it that we're able to make sure that we actually secure our network, right? And then it's the what, right? And this is the big piece, because right now, data is gold, right? And so if you are in an organization that has customer data, right, you're super vulnerable to these attacks, because people are using these attacks. They're selling the data of your customers so that they can sell it on to people who are going to use it to scam people, basically, right? So, where are you keeping your data, right? Is it secure? Is it a locked file? Do you encrypt your files? So just say you're going a little bit old school, you've got all your customer details and you capture all your customer details in Excel, right? And so do you have password encryption on your data files? And all Microsoft Office products actually have password encryption, right? When you're sending information to people, right? So whether you're sending it to somebody else on your team, whether it's your financials, whether it's your stats, whether it's your customer details, whether it's financial details, right? Whatever is moving in the cyber world, at any point, the minute you're in a network, the minute you're online, the minute you're connected, right, you're vulnerable, right? So how is it that you make sure that you've got that added layer of security in terms of your files and all the sensitive pieces of information and data? The other thing is, the protection of personal information, or POPI Act, right? And so in South Africa, it's POPI. In the UK, it's GDPR. A lot of organizations and countries are now starting to think about, who's responsible for protection of information, right? And do you have the customer's permission to be able to collect that information? How are you storing that information? How are you aggregating that information? How are you dispersing that information, right? So if you're collecting that data and somebody bridges your computer system, your IT system, and they steal all that data, and whatever cost is associated to it, you're actually liable from a legal perspective, right? So, it's super important to make sure that when you're securing your files, you need to make sure that you've got your password protection on, that there's an authentication process that is part of keeping that system secure. And then the last part is, where you're backing up your files, right? So if you're hacked right now, right, and somebody kind of loads a malware onto your computer system, right? Are you completely taken out, right? Is all your files and information gone, right? Is your system completely down? Have they killed your business in one software attack or one malware attack, right? And so there's some cloud computing solutions, right? So if you're saving it into Dropbox, remember thinking about, the security of the data, making sure that it's two-step authentication into logging into apps like Dropbox or other cloud storage opportunities. Also backing it up on, hard drives, let's go old school, and then if you've got paper, if you're still like super old school and you still kind of got details in paper, how secure are those records, right? What records are you keeping safe and secure? Where are you keeping it safe and secure, right? And so start to think about, security in a broad sense and the liability that you have when you're keeping your customers' data. In terms of security that we don't think about as startups and as small businesses, because we're really focused on the business, right? But when you think about it, and this one is from Interpol, because cybersecurity is a global concern, right? Because we're interconnected, right? Just because you're a small business in South Africa doesn't mean that somebody in the other side of the world can't hack you, right? Doesn't mean that your data isn't important for or relevant for somebody, in the bottom half of the world or in the top half, right? So here's a super easy checklist, right? That we've gone through. So the one is around, managing your social media profiles, right? So thinking about, how protected are you in terms of social media, right? Do you have two-step authentication when you're logging into your apps, whether it's Instagram? So Instagram has just started two-step authentication, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, right? So how do you manage your profile to make sure that it is secure, right? If you see, every now and again, Google yourself, and then also on Facebook, just check, put in your name and see what comes up, right? And then you can see whether somebody has cloned your account or not, and you can then go and report that, right? And it's amazing how many times people do this, and then they find that there's clones of themselves around the world asking people for things, right? And then you get all these messages, guys, this wasn't me, I promise you, I didn't ask anybody for money, right? So be careful and make sure that your social media profiles are secured. The second one is to check your privacy and security settings. And this is very, very important, right? Because on our smartphones, we've got an ability to be able to actually turn off tracking. Now, I always recommend you turn off tracking on your apps. And that's just because, and especially for women, it geotags you wherever you are, right? And for those people who have kids, especially, this is super important. If you're putting pictures of your kids online, right? I saw the most horrible thing, right? I saw somebody, put pictures of her kids all online, and it was geocoded. So and she was doing Instagram live with her kids, and I knew, and literally I know exactly where she is with her kids almost every given moment, right? And because we're putting so much of ourselves out there, and in a world where people are stealing kids and making money out of it, right? Please don't do that, right? Please don't put where you are. Please don't put your geolocation on. If you want to post, while I know that Instagram is amazing, rather be latergram, okay? Rather just wait until if you want to post that you were having breakfast at the one and only, that's amazing, but post it at lunchtime after you've left, right? Just to make sure that you keep yourself safe at all times. Don't make yourself a target in the cyber world. And what we do in the cyber world also has implications in the real world, right? When somebody sends you an email, if it looks suspicious, right? Just be careful, right? If there are attachments, generally don't open them unless you know that that attachment comes from a secure location, right? Or if it's coming from somebody that you know, right? The other thing is software updates, right? And so you get a whole lot of antivirus software that is available. And I know for small companies, it's the last thing that you're worried about, right? You're like, oh, I have to buy licensing for Office and Excel and everything. But cybersecurity, if you invest right now in cybersecurity, right, it means that you're going to save in the long term, right? So make sure that you get a good software to keep all of your systems safe, right? spoke about passwords. I can't speak enough about passwords, right? So make sure strong passwords, two-step authentication, make sure that it's alpha, numeric, and symbolic, right? So make sure that you've got a nice mix up there so that nobody can guess it, right? And then don't forget it, because sometimes we come up with like super fancy like passwords, and then you're like, what was that password again? So just make sure that you do remember your passwords, otherwise you're going to be locked out. Strengthen your home network, right? So as we're moving from home, more and more in terms of from a COVID perspective, a lot of companies have had amazing infrastructure in the office, and they've gotten secure servers and you can't get in. But now we've gone, everybody can work from home, but we haven't actually secured a home operation as much as we have, in the office, right? And so just be cognizant that, you need to strengthen your home network as much as you're strengthening your office network, right? And so, what kind of cybersecurity incentives and support are you giving your team members that are working at home? And then, back up your stuff, because if you are vulnerable to attack, and they take your data or they crash your system, right, that you still have it, that it's secured offline securely, right? And so make sure that you are just, thinking very clearly around security. And I love Interpol's, saying, be vigilant, be skeptical, and be safe, right? And so I'm a very skeptical person, which has saved me literally on 2 occasions in the last 6 months, from activity in terms of cyber attacks on my own personal self. I can just imagine what everybody else is going through as well. So, think about all of these components when you are online, as we as we close off, and we think about really as startups, it's challenging out there for us to be entrepreneurs, and it doesn't get any easier. And I know that the last thing anybody wants to think about is an added layer of worry, right? But if you had any business and you put a gate in front and you locked it, and you got ADT as your security company, and you put a camera system, whatever level of security you needed for your physical space or your physical business, make sure that your virtual operation has the same support and the same security to protect yourself online. Thank you so much for listening all to me around cybersecurity.